Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Sweeney. I'm the Director of Education and Special Programs at the Center for Nonprofit Advancement. We are very excited to have recently wrapped up our 2020 Excellence in Chief Executive Leadership Award, or Excel Award. And we're even more excited to be able to share that we have this year's winner and honorable mentions selected. We're going to be joined by Tara Fitzpatrick-Navarro today. More on her in a second. But this is one of 4 videos we'll be releasing, this one focusing on centralizing governance. So we're really excited to be able to share these kind of best practices that we lifted out throughout the Excel Award process this year. With that, I will pass things over to Ricardo Trujillo with GRF CPAs and Advisors, the award sponsor.
Thank you, Sean. So yes, we're here today with one of our honorable mentions, Tara Fitzpatrick-Navarro, who's the CEO from USTA Mid-Atlantic Section. But I also wanted to take a second to thank all the other applicants, the panelists, and of course, all the other honorable mentions. My name again, Ricardo Trujillo. I'm one of the audit partners at GRF CPAs and Advisors, located in Bethesda, Maryland. And also, I'm pretty excited to have just joined the board of directors for the center literally about a month ago or so. So pretty excited about that. But GRF is one of the top 200 CPA firms in the nation. And also as an independent firm local to the DC area, we have had the opportunity and the privilege to sponsor this particular award since 2007. So it's a privilege to be able to be part of that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sean and Tara to take it on.
Great, thanks so much, Ricardo. So welcome, Tara. Like Ricardo said, Tara is the CEO of the USTA Mid-Atlantic Section. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tara. So we have a few questions, and this should only be about 10 to 15 minutes, but again, on the topic of centralizing governance. So the first question, Tara, is if you could just tell us about the mission of your organization and how the affiliates are structured. Just how many affiliates are there? What's kind of the geographic area that you cover, and any other details you feel like sharing?
Sure. So I'm with the U.S. Tennis Association Mid-Atlantic Section, which means we do all things tennis in Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and D.C. Our mission is to promote and develop the growth of tennis. So anything that's involved in tennis, from tiny tots all the way to seniors and everything in between, we're involved in. We are one of 17 sections of the U.S. Tennis Association, but we are all independent organizations with independently incorporated with our own boards, our own staff, etc. So we no longer actually have any affiliates of our own. When I first came on board to USTA Mid-Atlantic, we had 3 functioning sort of affiliate organizations that we eventually worked to centralize. And that's what I think we're going to talk about today.
Great, thank you for that. So if you could just kind of walk us through what it kind of looked like ahead of time with the other local affiliates, those 3 other organizations you talked about. What was governance like before then, before you really started implementing changes to centralized governance, and kind of walk us through what communication between them was like, things like that.
Sure. So when I came on board, there was district offices that were at the state level. So there was one for Maryland and one for DC that were still functioning. Previously, there had been one for Virginia and one for West Virginia, and those were no longer functioning. So the organization was sort of half in, half out of centralization, and it made it really challenging to look at the entire geography of the section as a whole. Because the board was made up at the section level of representatives from each of the other entities. And so the way money was allocated, the way strategic planning was done, everything was done in this sort of disenfranchised way, where we would talk only about Maryland or talk only about Virginia or DC. And then in addition to that, we were a 501c4 at the time, and we also had a separate 501c3 that had sort of decided to chart a little bit of their own path, and weren't necessarily working as cohesively with the 501c4 section at the time. And so Communication was very different depending upon the entity. In some cases, there was no communication at all. In other cases, there was a strong positive relationship, but not always alignment around what we should be doing or how we should be doing it. But at the end of the day, I think the thing that made such a difference was that all of the people were so committed to the mission, even if they were looking at it as, you know, more on a granular level for their own area. Once you started talking about the mission, everybody could light up and get excited. So to me, that sort of was the groundwork that helped move us towards centralization. But it was a long and arduous process.
Great. Well, I guess my next question then moves straight into that. You know, what was that process like? How did you go about implementing changes in order to centralize things? And kind of also what were seen as priorities throughout the process?
Sure. So governance came first, and we had to recreate the governance of the section so that it was not focused on the districts. So all of the articles of incorporation and bylaws needed to be rewritten in order to change the board composition, the way in which members interacted, etc. So that was a process that we actually did in committee. And then had outside legal counsel review. But that was certainly fraught with a lot of you know, back and forth and ensuring that the constituencies of each of those then districts felt like they were going to continue to have appropriate representation and that they were going to have, you know, a voice at the table and that their community was still going to be served. And so while the governance piece was ongoing, that sort of communication, dialogue, trust building was also happening with the leaders from those other organizations. Once we did that, the section was reimagined, but those district entities were separate legal entities. They still existed. And so we then provided assistance to them to help them either continue as an entity, but not necessarily an affiliate of ours, or collapse and transfer their resources to us. And with the two functioning districts, in both cases, they decided to work with us to collapse and transfer their resources, which was a positive because it didn't happen right away. So there needed to be you know, a little bit of time for them to see how a centralized section would support them and how we would work together. And so once all of that governance happened, all of those entities also had employees. Plus there were employees from one of the entities who had previously shut down. And so all of those people came into the section. So we had 4 executive directors, we had you know, multiple people in the same role. And so I had to sort of reimagine what the organization would look like without focusing on geography. And so we focused really on our program areas and the skill sets of our employees. One of the commitments that I made to all of the leadership from the other affiliates was that anyone that was currently employed would continue to be employed. They wouldn't necessarily be in the same role, but they would have a role with the section. And so we actually went through a process where working with both a consultant as well as internally with staff, reimagined the entire organizational structure, all new job descriptions, interviewed every single one of those people, and then cast them into roles, and then worked to build a brand new organizational culture with all of those people who had been in those separate districts. Once that was done, we then had to deal with the rogue 501c3 that had sort of gone off and started doing its own thing. And so that was a totally separate and additional process that we actually did a reverse merger and took our C4 and merged it into the C3, so that now we as an organization are down to one and only entity, which makes my life much easier.
I'm sure. Yeah, it sounds like a long, arduous process. So I guess my next question would be, as a result of all of that hard work, what does it look like now? How is it running with just the one organization?
Yeah. So while it was definitely arduous, and we did all of it, the first part of it all in 6 months, the very first 6 months that I was on board. It didn't take as long as it sounds like. I think what was important to me was two things, is that after we finish all of this behind the scenes work with governance and shuffling people around, that we really focus on being the best we could be. And we focused in two areas. We focused on high level governance, and we focused on high level staff engagement and support. And so with those sort of two philosophies in mind, we allocated our resources to ensure that all of our board members were adequately trained, that resources were provided for them, that they understood their roles and responsibilities better, and they felt that they could go out and speak as a member of the board with authority, without jeopardizing the organization, right? So there was communications training, and there was governance training, and there was legal training in order to help the board have the confidence really in this new organization to go out to their constituency and say to them, hey, we're doing great things. You need to know more about USTA Mid-Atlantic. And then internally, we focused really heavily on how to engage, reward, and motivate staff. And we worked directly with our staff team in order to do that. So they helped set what our company values were. They helped set what our cultural norms were. And, it was really tough for those people to make that transition, to come from their district where they might have been in a much higher level position, executive director, associate director, and they're coming in and they're maybe running a program now. And within that first year, we won an employee engagement award. And to me, that was so telling of, wow, we've done this really hard thing, and people should probably not love their job as much as they do. Some people got pay cuts, they were not in as prominent of a role, and yet they were probably happier than they'd ever been, because centralizing helped everyone, both the board and the staff, really see one vision and one direction, and created this cohesive team that allowed people to feel like they were working together along a set path and a set journey. The organization had never had a strategic plan before, so that was one of the first things the board did after centralizing. And that just, I think, built everyone's confidence about, all right, we can do this and we can really make an impact on our community.
That's awesome. Especially about the Employee Engagement Award too. That's incredible. So I guess my last question then, talking to other organizations, really the point of these videos is to kind of pull out those best practices and kind of share with the sector. What first step can other similar organizations take in implementing similar changes or similar practices that you guys have done?
Sure. So the first thing I would say is that not every affiliate structure is bad. We have actually evaluated creating a new affiliate to protect risk for our organization on a new innovative endeavor that we're working on. So the first thing to know is, just because you have affiliates doesn't mean you need to centralize governance. But the most important thing that I think is that affiliates always need to have that sort of parent-child relationship where one entity is guiding the other. And that was what was missing from ours and why it really resulted in a need for centralization. I think the other thing for us was really looking at the financial impact. We saved a lot of money by moving to a centralized organization because we weren't duplicating services in the same way that we were before. So really, in order to set out the case for centralization, first off, I had to really understand the legal structure and whether or not the affiliates had that true parent-child relationship or were charted on the same path or not, and what the financial implications were for the organization. And so after that analysis, all signs pointed to centralization is the right thing for us, but that's not always the right thing for everyone. The other thing I would say is that creating opportunities for people to weigh in on the future of an organization is critically important, regardless of the level that a person is. So from the volunteer to the board member to the staff person to the CEO and everybody in between, there were a lot of different people who played a lot of different roles in reimagining who we were. And I think that gave people a lot of buy-in into creating what has become a really successful centralized organization. So, I would say it's about analysis first and, figuring out, is this the right thing? And then creating a process by which there's going to be a lot of engagement and buy-in from people at all levels.
Great, thank you. I think that's super helpful for people to know. Well, that's it for us today. We really, really appreciate your answers to these questions, Tara. I think it's going to be super useful for other people in the sector who are experiencing similar issues or maybe looking to go down the same path. So we really appreciate it. So thank you to you, Tara, and to you as well, Ricardo, for joining us from GRF. Like I said earlier, this is one of 4 videos that will be released after Thanksgiving. So please keep an eye out for the other 3. But otherwise, thank you so much for spending your time with us. And we hope to see you at another center event or class or whatever this is sometime soon. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.